suppose you know that if you don't want to be filmed, then you can tell Tommy to not put the camera on you, perhaps. Before we go any further, I'd like to, first of all, I better turn my phone off, actually. Thank all council officers, emergency services and volunteers involved in addressing and responding to the many emergencies reported last Friday and suffered by residents and businesses. And I understand what our members of staff have suffered that flooding as well. So, in particular, I must thank our response crews who distributed over 2,500 sandbags, as well as our volunteer flood wardens, especially Councillor Steve Wayne and Joe Linthwaite here in Matlock, but no doubt there are elsewhere there were volunteers who performed a similar duty in their own communities. So thank you to all of them, and to obviously Councillor Wayne and Councillor Linthwaite in Matlock, as they've been, well, Councillor Wayne's been doing that job for a long time now, so he's almost a professional flood warden, I think. Right, so I think you can see who officers are tonight, so I don't need to introduce them, except the all singing, all dancing Tommy, who's doing, I think, 3 duties tonight, with a camera and taking minutes and giving advice to me that's required. So thank you to him and to fellow officers for coming tonight to give reports and answer questions. So Tommy, can you just report on apologies and substitutes?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We've got apologies tonight from Councillors Archer, Slack and Boothroyd, with Councillor Shelley attending as substitute.
Thank you. Right, I think the next item on the agenda is to find the agenda. There's no public participation, but we need to obviously approve minutes from the previous meeting. So if you can look at those, and if anyone's got any points to raise on those before we approve them. No?
Right, move approval, Chair.
Right. Seconded. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Dobbs. Right. Oh, better I vote, that's right, yes. All in favour? Thank you. Right, next one is item 4, interest. Anyone any interest to declare? No? Right, thank you. Then the next item 5 is questions. Now, Sir Wayne has obviously given notice that he wants to ask a question. He's asked it already. As you'll see, you've got a copy in front of you. Oh, yes, in fact, that's something I haven't got on a copy of my minutes, the paper copy. Yes, it's subcommittee minutes, not just the committee meetings from the last minute. Oh, shit. Somebody else here? Oh, Councillor Boothroyd's here. Okay, right, thank you. So we approved the minutes of the last meeting, but we need to approve the subcommittee minutes from is it local plan subcommittee and the biodiversity subcommittee. So you've had those, I think. So anyone like to comment on those, or would someone like to propose that they be accepted? Okay, thank you. All in favour? Right, thank you. Right. So now we do go on to questions from members. That's Councillor Wayne. Go ahead, Councillor Wayne.
Thank you. I make no apologies for the length of this statement in question, because it isn't just about this particular one, it's about other sites within the Derbyshire Dales. So I would ask members to take heed. Matlock has once again featured in the media, not for the fact that it is a beautiful historic spa town, but because it has a serious issues with parts of its ineffective infrastructure, exposed by excessive housing development, inadequate planning assessment, and a lack of knowledge of its hydrology and geology. In July, there was a public health incident around the Presentation Avenue area of Matlock, where foul and surface drainage infrastructure surcharged during a significant rainfall event. Premises in the area and in the lower catchment were flooded by combined surface water and human waste, this being deposited into both public and private areas. This is abhorrent and unacceptable. Currently, the foul waste from 300 homes is channelled through this affected network. These include properties on Bentley Close, Gritston Road and Asker Lane. The waste flow is exacerbated by joining combined flows on Chesterfield Road and even further exacerbated by the gradients in the Presentation Avenue area. I wish to bring to your attention the fact that the foul waste from an additional 78 homes will propose to be built adjacent to Gritston Road are projected to flow through this infrastructure onto Presentation Avenue. Are you surprised and shocked by this recognised increased risk? I was, but apparently not the Derbyshire County Council Local Lead Flood Authority, who appear to have failed to mention the issue in their consultation response to the Gritston Road site dated the 22nd of September 2023. In this document, the LFA also rescinded a holding objection relating to excessive water flows from the site, which they had imposed in 2022. Again, no rationale was provided in justification for their actions. Furthermore, in the same consultation, they appear to abdicate responsibility and pass responsibility to our local plan authority by recommending 6 conditions. Regularly, the comment appears, construction shall not commence until a detailed assessment has been provided and approved by the local planning authority. Who are the experts here? I know Derbyshire Dales District Council have qualified and effective planners, but by their own admission, they are not drainage specialists. The LFA have failed to specifically acknowledge or mention other significant issues highlighted by the community, and I stress the community. The community have had to find these things out, including the significant increase in the size of and safety concerns for the attenuation dams, which are now so large they require a panel engineer to assess them, continuing to allow excessive surface water flows from the developed area, phase 1, against original Severn Trent Water advice and instruction, their willingness to proceed with culverting a significant length, approximately 230 metres, of surface water flow against their own and the Environmental Agency policy, culverting increasing surface water flows under dwellings on Bentley Close without knowing where the actual outfall breaks out, not commenting upon or apparently assessing the increased impact of significant deforestation above the proposed site. I sincerely hope you're able to seek further clarification from the LFA and protect our officers and the Derbyshire Dales District Council. If you're not the intended, hang on, let me just. So basically, I've lost the page of my thing, but that's very, very kind. Thank you. I sincerely hope that you're able to seek further clarification from the LFA and protect officers and the Derbyshire Dales District Council from any potential consequent litigation regarding flooding issues linked to this site. And I therefore ask of you, the Chair, will the Chair of this committee, on behalf of the local community, businesses and our Council, ensure Derbyshire County Council Local Lead Flood Authority provide an assurance that they have robustly assessed all the issues highlighted by the community regarding the entire hybrid site, that's phases 1, 2, 3 and 4, and provide full reasoning and documentation to support all their recommendations in the consultation document dated the 22nd of September 2023? And will you also ensure that the LFA provide a comprehensive response and documentation to explain their irrational and potentially reckless decision to rescind the previous holding objection in light of all the new documented evidence submitted by the community and Severn Trent Water? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Wayne. Well, my reply is, dear Councillor Wayne, thank you for your questions relating to surface and foul water drainage issues in several neighbourhoods in the area north of Matlock Town Centre. Firstly, I want to say that I share your view that it is disgusting and totally unacceptable that recent flooding events in the town have resulted in human waste being deposited in premises below Presentation Avenue off Chesterfield Road. When I say premises, that includes properties and other centres as well. Thank you for your continuing efforts and those of your colleague councillors and local resident groups to uncover what you all consider to be the cause of this, as well as those responsible. I'm sure you'll understand that it would be inappropriate for me to comment in detail on any aspect of the current Gritston Road Wolves Farm planning application. However, I believe it is vital that our officers demand a full report from the panel engineer appointed by Derbyshire County Council to examine the drainage aspects of that application to enable our planning committee members to reach an informed decision in due course. I consider that this and other similar applications should not be brought before the planning committee unless and until officers are fully satisfied that detailed plans of supporting infrastructure are approved, would be conditioned and in place prior to the commencement of any housing development. Likewise, with regard to the need for a preliminary risk assessment of any large flood attenuation basins proposed, I will work with officers and relevant members, including you, Councillor Wayne, to insist that the Environment Agency examine that risk assessment should it be considered necessary under the Reservoirs Act. Finally, I can assure you, Councillor Wayne, that I will also work with officers to get an assurance from the County Council's lead local flood authority that all the issues and concerns highlighted by Matlock councillors and the local community have been robustly assessed and evidence provided to confirm and support their recommendations to this council.
Thank you. If I can just fleetingly come back. Can I just add that I have actually been waiting a month from Severn Trent Water in relation to the area of Presentation Avenue, and I've not received a response to my correspondence. So can you please add that to your list for communication? I urge the council to basically ensure that all information is put into the public domain. It's really important. We can't just have a catch-all condition without evidence. It's really important on the planning portal we get that. And it's very, very scant, and it is, in my opinion, it's putting unnecessary pressure on our local plan officers who are not qualified to make those decisions, and we have to really have a good look at that. And I really have some serious concerns. We've found this out as a community. We found this as a community by being robust and dogged and belligerent, basically. And I would urge everybody else to check for big, you've got big developments in Ashbourne. Have a look at the drainage plans. Get somebody who maybe have some knowledge to look at them, because all that's written down isn't necessarily correct. So, thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, Councillor Wayne.
I think there was a question there.
I do know.
Please, but,
I do know some of the issues that you're talking about, of course, because we've obviously had the benefit of your experience and advice over the last few years on a regular basis.
Frustration more than
and I think
else,
you could draw a map of all the drainage issues on that site. In fact, all the sites and all the land north of Matlock Town Centre, really, I think, in terms of the drainage runs and where they've been misplaced. For instance, there's an attenuation basin off Presentation Avenue, which was nearly empty even last weekend, whereas the one at the bottom of the site, above the housing areas, was nearly full. So that's the contrast between one, or a success and a failure, if you like, but it should be the first line of defence that works, not leaving it to the second line to defend residents and businesses and such like, and organisations from serious flood events. So I can assure you that I will join with you to do what I can to try to get the right answers from the responsible bodies, particularly the lead local flood authority and the Environment Agency and Severn Trent Water, as you've just mentioned. Okay.
I listen to everything you say, and I always marvel at planning when you get Severn Trent and they're a consultee and whatever, how quickly they seem to come back and but quite often don't actually highlight if there's any issues. They've got capacity and whatever. And I've always thought for years, thinking, did you ever predict there was going to be these houses, this volume of houses built in Ashbourne and other places and whatever? And I always think, but we don't have a facility to really challenge what they tell us, and the poor planning officers, they have to take what they're told and whatever. And we do need to do something. And Severn Trent are notorious for not coming back. I've had appointments with Severn Trent, and it's not the 11th hour. It's 5 to 12, and they said, "Oh, I can't make the meeting. Let's make a meeting for another day." I don't know how we pull them into line and make them a bit more accountable to us, because obviously we're not doing it for our health. It's obviously our residents. They want answers. So if we can do anything to encourage them to be more forthcoming, it'd be fantastic. So,
well, I fully agree with you. In fact, I've got an outstanding complaint to Severn Trent Water, which I was assured by their press officer would be replied to very quickly. That was about a week ago now. After there's raw sewage flowing onto Bakewell Road, which isn't satisfactory, obviously. and they haven't come back to me yet. I want to know what's going on this particular site, which is opposite Twigs on Bakewell Road. You've probably seen it. So that's one example. But I mean, one problem is, and I know my wife Sue, as a long-standing member of the planning committee, she used to welcome county council highways engineers to meetings of the planning committee, so that they could be questioned about some of these issues. But they no longer attend meetings at all. I think she's trying to persuade someone to come along to certainly important meetings when you've got a major planning application being discussed, housing application, for instance. So we will pursue that. Yes. Mm. No. That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Well, thank you for that. Yeah. Councillor G.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and that was well said there. And I'd like to really thank Councillor Wayne for this and bringing this to the fore, because it's a serious issue. And I'd also like to thank him for the work he's done as the flood warden, because I heard him on Radio Derby and he came on very well. I think it was, I don't know if it was another programme. But the reality is here is that, which you really well point out to us, is that, you know, there is excessive housing developments, but, you know, we need more housing, so there's going to be more. And the fact is, Severn Trent are just not fit for purpose. They're a joke. They're taking the money from people. You know, a new house gets built, they've got a bill on the doorstep straight away. I think, as a full council, I think we're united on this. It's a joke because our infrastructure needs improving, sewerage, drainage, etc. And Severn Trent are the ones that are profiteering out of this, and they're a total, you know, not fit for purpose organisation, and I think we need to put pressure on them.
Yes, thank you, Councillor G. No? Nobody else? Right. I think we can move on to the next item then. That's Ashbourne Air Quality Management Area Action Plan. Tim Braun, do you think you want to introduce this?
I shall. Thank you, Chair. Firstly, Amanda and Karen both send their apologies. Amanda is on planned leave. Karen, unfortunately, is dealing with impacts of flooding on her own behalf, so can't be here tonight. So you've got me. This report, I've not got a lot to add to the report. This report summarises a meeting of the core group of the Air Quality Action Plan Working Group that was held a while back, and talks about investigating the synergies between the air quality work and the Ashbourne Reborn programme that's ongoing. At that meeting, we talked about ways to progress desired actions within the Air Quality Action Plan, and it was agreed that a period of negotiation would be the correct way forward at that time. The report informs you of that and says that a further updating report would be brought to a future meeting of this committee, and that's the purpose of the report, really. I'm happy to obviously to take any questions and try and answer as much as I can.
Tim knows I have 4. Oh, sorry, 3. 3, yes, no surprises. In the minutes that we agreed was a true record. Resolution 4 was to bring to this meeting an update on widening the what we're monitoring to include particulates. So could you update us on that one?
Yeah, I should say that whilst Karen's not properly in work, she has emailed me with some updates for this in the meantime. There was due to be a meeting on Tuesday of the Derbyshire Environmental Protection Group, which is a group that, amongst other things, is looking at progressing a county-wide approach to fine particulate monitoring, that being a building issue within the air quality world. That meeting was postponed because so many of the people who were due to attend that meeting were working on flood relief around the county, and will be rearranged. What I'd happily do is provide an update to that work as soon as that meeting's been rearranged and held. And thank you, by the way, for submitting your questions in advance. It does make getting the answers much better.
Thank you. Question 2. I note that the 2023 annual status report is now on the website, and I think I emailed everybody here. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it. It would be good if you had. Do we know what the position is on the 2022 one, please?
Karen tells me the position on that is that there are a couple of amendments she needs to make with the agreement of DEFRA, and then they should be in a position to approve it, and as soon as it's approved, we'll be publishing it.
Thanks. And finally, I understood from Karen that the latest draft of the action plan had been submitted to Alan Marsden at County, he being largely the author of most of the actions in that plan. It was about 3 weeks ago. Have we heard back from Alan?
Karen apologises. Her chasing's been limited this week for obvious reasons, but she hasn't had a response yet, and she'll follow that up as soon as she can. And again, we'll report back to you, Councillor, well, to members in general.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dobbs. I think probably on that subject, we should, all of us on this committee, wish Karen all the best in terms of dealing with the problems that she's got. Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, can I just echo what you said at the beginning of the meeting, Councillor Burfitt? I think we're all incredibly grateful for all our officers and the members that have all worked so incredibly hard. Can I do a big thank you out to Jim with the comms, which have been absolutely fantastic. And on a personal level, Ashley Watts and his team, who helped me really personally at Baslow, so thank you. My question, I realise the recommendations are sort of quite straightforward, and I'm sorry, Tim, I've not had a chance to ask in advance, but I've seen with the working with Derbyshire County Council and High Peak Borough Council, Derbyshire County Council's got a memorandum of understanding with the mineral products industry. I know they've worked quite hard to establish, with ideas to decarbonise, this very important sector. Have all the members of this group got access to that memorandum of understanding? Do they know what's happening?
What's proposed on the air quality grounds particularly is to get a specific liaison group working between Derbyshire County Council, High Peak and ourselves. High Peak have declared an air quality management area as well. And the thinking is that a lot of lorry movements in particular, or a lot of goods movements in particular, will be travelling through both of those air quality management areas. So the plan is to move from being basically a minerals planning-led group to get something specific going to talk about air quality. And again, we'll keep members updated on progress on that. Very conscious that was one of the most popular options within the action plan consultation, and we want to get that right as well.
Thank you, Chair. I recall from a previous meeting we'd discussed some new kit that would be able to make more accurate readings on a sort of in real time. Any development on purchasing that equipment? And are we purchasing it? I don't believe it county are. Any updates?
Okay. Well, County Council have purchased some or we're in the process of purchasing some air quality monitoring, some of which will be deployed in Ashbourne. That's part of a bid that they put in a while ago. But we're also, it relates to Councillor Dobbs' first question, really. We're also proposing to obtain our own measuring equipment to use not just in Ashbourne, but around the district. That's the work that I mentioned will be progressed through the Environmental Protection Group, and we'll update members when that group's been rearranged and held. Well, I'll provide an update within the next month. Hopefully there'll be a meeting rearranged.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not sure that resources on measuring equipment is quite the way to go, because we already know that the air quality is appalling. So what's the point? But what I want to ask is that the thing I brought up at a previous meeting was initiating diverting traffic, the majority of which is the quarry traffic from High Peak, Buxton, surrounding areas, down the Via Gellia, because eliminate the source and you'll eliminate the end result. So have we followed this up? And I would suggest that it isn't enough to just to engage with the quarries themselves, because the actual transport is a very small percentage is actually owned by the quarries. The transport from quarries around Buxton is independent haulage operators, and they're the ones we need to be reaching. They're the ones we need to be contacting. So, can I ask if we did make any movements towards those kind of overtures after the last meeting?
Thanks, Chair. To take the last bit first, the recommendation in the action plan is minerals and logistics industry. I couldn't say that then. So yes, we're aware of the owner driver and the independent company side of things there, Councillor Chapman, and engage with them as well. In relation to diverting traffic, that was an issue that was explored very, very early on with the County Council because it's an obvious starting point. And that they're not willing, well, they don't believe that that will be the correct way to go. It's been explored in some length and is not something that the County Council would put in an action plan that they were party to.
Just ask a follow-up on that. Presumably for the Ashbourne, or prior to the Ashbourne Reborn project being implemented on the ground, the County Council are presumably drawing up alternative routes for heavy traffic through Ashbourne anyway, aren't they? Is that something which is being progressed at the moment?
Yeah, the county are aware that the programme will have a disruptive effect on, well, will change the way that traffic operates in Ashbourne, and that there will need to be changes during the course of that project, yes.
Right, Councillor Wayne.
Thank you. Following on from Councillor Chapman's comment, you say some work's been undertaken by Derbyshire County Council. Can we see that work? That's the first question, because obviously I'd like to see what was planned and how the decision making was made. Thank you.
Well, I didn't say work had been done. What I said is it was something that was discussed with the County Council early doors, and it was ruled out by them, and that's the position that we've got.
Well, I'd like to see their rationale for ruling it out. Is that something that we can do, please?
I'll certainly research what was provided at the time and provide you with that, Councillor Wayne.
The second one is obviously as this moves along, and I always ask this question, what about the impacted people and the health and well-being of them on Buxton Hill? Are we regularly seeing them and updating them with what we're doing? You know, meeting their expectations and also providing some assurance to them. Is that still ongoing, please?
I haven't got a regular meeting with residents on Buxton Hill. We have spoken to public health about advice that can be provided to them, and the advice that public health colleagues at the County Council have suggested is that those individual health concerns need to be discussed with GPs. That's the advice that we've had back from public health.
Yeah, just coming back on that, because obviously each time this is on there, it's reported in the Ashbourne News Telegraph. These people are reading this, and family members are reading this, and that then exacerbates their concerns, I would think, because it's protracted. Sorry. So, have we told them that they've got to go and see the doctors, and have we given them any sort of reason, you know, what to look out for? Thank you.
That's not particularly a piece of advice that our officers are qualified to give. They're not doctors and they're not public health specialists. However, it was an advice that was given by public health specialists at the second of the consultation, public meetings that were part of the consultation.
Thanks very much.
Kelly.
Thank you. Just follow up on Councillor Chapman's point. I do appreciate the need to try and head off the lorries at their source a bit more. Though I'm not altogether sure that the residents of Cromford would appreciate the diversion down the Via Gellia. It's already very, very congested at the marketplace there and the crossroads. I'd be interested in knowing how many discussions we've had with our colleagues in the County Council about ensuring that more of this quarry traffic is diverted to what I think is probably about the only railhead that I know, which is the one up near Buxton, because rather than just trying to shuffle lorries around on different roads, the obvious solution here is to take it out by rail.
That's, in terms of specific recent discussions, that's not something I've been party to. In general terms, the shift from rail to road was entirely driven by cost, and is regrettable. There used to, of course, be a railhead in Wirksworth that dealt with local mineral traffic as well.
Right. Does someone want to propose recommendation 1 and 2? Yes. Councillor Dobbs.
Happy to propose those two recommendations, Chair.
Yeah.
I'd like to speak in a
Seconder. Yeah. Councillor Wayne, thank you. We'll move on to debate now, so any contributions? Councillor Dobbs.
Right, if you bear with me for a bit, I'd like to set some of the scene for this, because if you have read the ASR, you'll know that it's actually fairly upbeat about the situation. And it's certainly true that only one of the 24 diffusion tubes that are positioned by the District Council under Tim's leadership actually show a value that's over 40 micrograms per cubic metre as the adjusted, weighted annual average. However, and there is a big however, this figure of 40, which we use as the, in inverted commas, safe limit, it's important to get some history of that. This was the World Health Organization figure in 2005. By 2021, they'd reduced it to 10. The EU are aiming for 20 by the end of this decade. So 40 is not really safe. It was just the legal point at which the legislation cut in, and we're still kind of playing catch up. If we use this figure of 20 to judge our values, half of all those tubes are over 20. All of the ones in Ashbourne, except the one in the park, are over 20. So we've got some way to go to say that the air that we're, as it were, allowing to exist in Ashbourne is truly safe to breathe. We're endlessly finding more issues which appear to have some correlation to the quality of the air. I've prepared some slides, if you'll bear with me, which Tommy is going to show, just to give you some sort of feel of what we're seeing where in Ashbourne. We have an air quality management area, which essentially covers Buxton Hill and the sort of the bit at the bottom, which is a T-shape. Can you see there you've got 6 blue spots, which are the tubes, the diffusion tubes, and they more or less cover the area of the air quality management area. In particular, the top 2 at the Bowling Green pub and down lower at 16 Buxton Road, which is called Tube 12 and sometimes incorrectly called 12 Buxton Road. It's number 16. It's almost opposite St John's Church. Those are the ones which have given issues, and it's the one at 16 Buxton Road which we've had the most data of. And, well, what do the values look like? Well, if we take the raw values, we have the next slide. I just want to say, next slide, please. There we go. This is raw score, and it's only there to give a trend. To these bits of data, you have a bias, a factor, and then you adjust them for distance to a receptor. But essentially, the raw data will show you a trend. And you can see that they are going down. Not hugely quickly, but they are going down. And you can also see when the trees were trimmed, which is one thing that this council did really quite promptly. It made it look a lot better. I'm not convinced that it had any effect on NOx, but it certainly tidied up Buxton Road quite well. That was because foliage can prevent the free movement of air, and this is a gas from the tailpipes of vehicles that does diffuse away, and the more you can get it to diffuse, the better it is. It's not like carbon dioxide. It doesn't stay around for forever. It has a half-life. It reacts with things. That's why it's dangerous. So it's going down, but not particularly quickly. And in any case, if you've got an air quality management area, 40 isn't the kind of legal magic figure. It's 36 because you have to have a 10% margin. However, we go to the top of the hill. Next slide, please. You can see that not only are the values pretty darn high, they would be adjusted if you imagine all of those about 84% smaller, as it were. It's still above the legal limit. And they're not really going anywhere, are they? Now, Karen has some theories about why they're so high, and she might be right. It's because of the flow of traffic very close to this tube. It's right on the wall of the Bowling Green pub. Might actually reduce the effective tube length and therefore make the results. But until we get these real-time monitoring, we're not going to know. And as in many things, until you have good data, you can sometimes get misled. But I put this together, and if you remember the map, I think what we've got on Buxton Road is an increasing concentration of nitrogen dioxide, which increases from basically legality just about opposite St John's Church, and then it gets worse and worse and worse. And that does encompass several properties. And it's the terraced house at the top of those properties on the left-hand side, which probably represents the worst case we've got. And that's the one that I would like to see the action plan basing its figures on, because I think that's the one that you have to take account of and say, well, we need this much reduction so the inhabitants of that house can actually live, you know, reasonably safely with the air they breathe. So, which brings us to, no, I'll come back to that. This core steering group, and we met 6 officers and councillors and 2 members of Ashbourne Town Team. They're the people who basically dreamt up Ashbourne Reborn in the first case, and they wanted to put certain points with the idea that perhaps this opportunity from Ashbourne Reborn would be a way of making the two come together and to actually allow what they're going to do with Ashbourne Reborn to have some effect, some positive effect on the air quality in Ashbourne. And so that's what we're exploring. And particularly the idea, if we can keep the traffic moving steadily on the hill, both up and down, that would help. Down, because excessive braking does seem to generate a large amount of tyre and brake dust. And brings me to the final slide. This is from a property, that's windows, on a property in the terrace of houses on Buxton Road. All the other, it's a holiday let for him, and he doesn't come very often, so he doesn't wash them very often. I shouldn't have said that in public, should I? But the neighbours do have to wash pretty frequently to make the front of those houses look respectable. And so you can see what builds up, and that's particulate matter. If we had something that was measuring particulate matter, we'd know how much there was in the atmosphere, but it doesn't look too good. So vehicles coming down, particulate matter being deposited from brakes and tyres. Vehicles going up tend to accelerate after they've got out of Ashbourne, away from all the congestion, fantastic, foot down, up the hill. And if we could only get them to go slower and not accelerate, perhaps that would do something for the excess NOx emissions which engines will produce under load under those conditions. So those are the sorts of things we were exploring. Plus, as you've also heard, this idea of if we could get the hauliers and the mineral operators,
larger samples from areas that are more built up than ours and having a more serious traffic flows and whatever. Okay, oh, I told you I wasn't a scientist and whatever, but I just hear, you know, stories from around the town in Ashbourne, people saying that people's health is suffering, and others saying it's not, and you know something, I can't contest it one way or another because we don't have that data. But you've explained why we can't have that data. I'm not sure what difference the 20 mile per hour speed limit would possibly make. I mean, please, by all means, maybe we should have a workshop and some experts come in and show us and tell us, you know, what the effects of doing different things would actually have on the pollutants and whatever. I mean, people talk about the quarry industry, and a lot of those wagons that come through Ashbourne, as we've said before, a lot of them are Euro 6, and they've worked hard, and they you know, I don't think the quarry industry is totally the bogeyman in this. I don't think personally there are other routes. I think, as Councillor just mentioned, you know, diverting more traffic down the Vigelia is going to work particularly well. It's not the greatest road, but obviously we've got some serious issues in the Cromford area with congestion already. We'd then possibly then be looking at air quality situation then, and then what would we do then? You know. Anyway, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bates.
Chair. Regarding the new road layout in the Lough bid, I think that will create a 20 mile an hour. I would think that it will slow down. The 20 mile an hour isn't in the proposal for the Lough Fund, so that was reiterated this morning. Going to the top of Buxton Hill, a lot of the problem is the narrow point there, that a lot of lorries cannot get past each other and they're stuck at the top. And no matter what you do, it's never going to solve that. There's only one thing that will solve it, and it's a bypass. And I think this council should be pushing hell for leather to get this bypass done, and that will solve a lot of it. Thank you.
I just want to raise a sort of slight concern about Councillor Murphy's part of the debate around not understanding the science behind it. The reason we have an air quality management area is because we are above a legal limit. that legal limit has been defined by science, which essentially indicates that the air quality, particulates and NOx, no, not NOx, no, NO2 that we have drive health issues amongst the population. So it's not really, there's no requirement for a council to prove that. That's the legislation that we are operating to. And I think what Councillor Dobbs was saying about, essentially that those limits are reducing is as more evidence comes in, as this is tracked globally, we are then needing to respond to that. That's our job as a council, is to respond and ensure, not to assess people's health on a sort of street by street level. My other question is about the 20-mile-an-hour limit. So I think I've had this question raised at parish councils about villages as well, and there's a sort of, seems to be a bit of a blanket, we don't like 20-mile-an-hours across our district, and I'm really not fully understanding why that is. What is the reason why we think 20 miles an hour through our market towns is so abhorrent?
I don't know who's going to answer that question. Any officers present? No.
People weren't for them, I don't know, I haven't got that, but I mean, they did go out and consult, and that's what came back. Yeah, because there were going to be two sort of pilot schemes, but those two locations didn't want them. So it'd be interesting, you say, maybe survey a few other locations to see what people think.
Yeah, there has been plenty of research nationally done on that. The national action groups, in fact, and the regional ones below them that I know my wife Sue's been involved in with the campaign on behalf of some residents in Matlock, in Stockholm particularly. Can I ask Tim if you can come back on this?
Yeah, a couple of things. So firstly, I'm sure members are aware there's a bit of a political issue across the country as well around this. Locally, the County Council's position in relation to our discussions has been they want to wait for the results of the two pilot studies in Long Eaton and Buxton before moving on to other areas. And that's the response that we've had from them consistently throughout this exercise. We'll of course keep that dialogue open, but that, I'm not the County Council. That is the County Council's position.
Councillor G.
Yeah, thank you. I see that this discussion is being slightly deflected onto 20-mile-an-hour schemes, and I do have an interest on this actually. And actually, I think 20-mile-an-hour schemes are a good idea. And also, I'm totally aware of the County Council's sort of policy of looking at it in Long Eaton and Buxton. And the problem with doing that is that 20-mile-an-hour monitoring in towns like Long Eaton and Buxton, it's almost negligible because most of the traffic, it's impossible to go more than 20 mile an hour. But when you look at some of these rural villages, I'm not sure we can all look at different villages across Derbyshire Dales. Somewhere traffic drives fast through the village because it's able to do so because there isn't much traffic, and that's where it's dangerous. So the reason to have 20-mile-an-hour speed limits is for road safety. And if traffic goes slower, you'll have less accidents and it saves accidents. So I'm definitely in favour of that. And I can think, I mean, probably Bakewell wouldn't be a good example because it's hard to go more than 20 mile an hour, especially on a Saturday and a Sunday. But if you're in somewhere like Rowsley or whatever, when you're driving to get fast to Chatsworth, then that's where you want one. So, yeah, so I mean, I'm not sure about, we started with monitoring air quality in Ashbourne. One question I had about that was, with these monitoring devices, do we know what the actual results would be if you took them about 20 metres away from the road? I mean, do we do that? I mean, is it in a specific area right on top of the traffic? I mean, obviously you could have monitoring devices all the way around the village, but would that make a lot of difference?
No, I'll shoot you. You can put them wherever you like, basically, and then you do the following. You work out by following the fall off with distance what the NOx level, NO2 level, would be at the receptor, because it's 24-hour duration. We only regard as receptors people who live or work long term in a place. So things like hospitals would do, but mostly it's people's houses. So you eventually correct for distance. And so, yes, you obviously do get it more next to the road. That just happens to make the next part of the calculation slightly simpler, because you have to work out if it does exceed the theoretical limit at somebody's house. You then have to work back what it would be in the middle of the road, take off background, and work back to what it would be acceptable at the receptor. Does that make some sense? It's quite involved, but yes, we do, is the simple answer.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you in particular to Councillor G for raising his first point. And I can assure him that all the communities across the Derbyshire Dales have been making that similar point for many years, but it is like banging your head against a blue wall, I'm afraid. So I hope your colleagues at County Hall are listening to you. I want to go back to the point raised by Councillor Wayne, which I think is really pertinent, and we must never lose sight of the fact the reason that we have this air quality management zone, air quality management plan, and that is because the health of residents in Ashbourne is at risk. We have a life-limiting situation there, and I think we should, as a committee, recall the reason that we were not satisfied with the original draft action plan, and that was because there was no evidence that any of the actions in the plan were going to bring about a noticeable reduction in NOx levels, which was the purpose of the action plan. So that was the reason that we were not prepared to accept it as it was. And listening to the debate here this evening, there's amber lights flashing in my head now. We seem to be getting the pushback on any further actions which we have felt and the community have felt could bring about this meaningful reduction. And I don't want us to come back at our next meeting and future meetings to find that we're really back to where we were 6 months ago. So I think we need to offer every encouragement to members and officers who are part of this working group to make it clear that they've got our support as a council to come forward with some meaningful measures. And I know we said we want to work in cooperation with our partners, but at some point we may have to, I can't think of the right word, but we may need to find different ways of encouraging our partners to come on board. So I hope members will agree that we should offer every support to those who are members of this working group to come forward to an action plan which really is genuinely going to work to the benefit of the residents of this part of Ashbourne. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to quickly ask a question of Councillor Dobbs. Would the drop in potty or in NOx have coincided with the compulsory use of AdBlue in diesel engines, or have we not got that statistic?
I don't know. Obviously, that is part of the reduction because it acts as a reducing agent for the nitrogen dioxide and turns into nitrogen and water. Yeah. That's how it works. Yeah. So yes, those sorts of engines might. I think that my own take on that gentle downward shift, which is similarly repeated nationally, is part of technology. Older vehicles being taken off the road, newer vehicles being on the road. The question is it happening fast enough to protect the people on Buxton Road? And I think the answer is no.
Okay. Yeah, it was just a sort of... just going back to lorries, there'll be people here who remember there was a tragic accident of the bridge, the Tissington, going over the Tissington Trail south of the Tissington Gate some years ago. And as a result, the bridge was raised in height, and that reduced the number of, or that enhanced the amount of traffic that was able to travel through Ashbourne. So if that situation was occurring previous, then those lorries would have been finding alternatives to go to because they couldn't get under the bridge, and that will have increased the traffic. So it's labouring a point a bit, but I think, and I'll reiterate, that's the wrong word, address the source. We've got to address the source. And Tim, you said this has been discussed in the past. How long ago? And circumstances have changed considerably over the last couple of decades of traffic volumes and traffic size, etc. So I can't see the reason why this can't be revisited and looked at objectively, because it's all right DCC saying, oh, we've addressed it and it doesn't work, but it needs in lieu of a bypass coming on stream, then it needs to be addressed in some manner. And I would say to Councillor Shelley to address your point about increasing the traffic through Cromford, and I think one of Councillor Dobbs is it was the sighting of the detectors around the town. Lorries will spend way longer traversing the corners and the areas of Ashbourne, and you're going past residential housing. The Cromford route, it's a left turn onto the Cromford Road and a right turn onto the A6, and you're not going through residential housing. It will be far less of a problem in that short space of time for anything travelling through Cromford. So that's I'm labouring it, but I think it's the area we ought to look at seriously.
Thank you. Yes, I shared Councillor Chapman's desire to, if you like, solve the problem at the nub. And I seriously do think that this council should be revisiting that point I made about the rail industry. Now, I know highways is not a Derbyshire Dales district council responsibility, but there does sometimes seem to be a blind spot where, because something hasn't happened in the past, people rule it out. And I lay this charge at the door of the County Council as much as anyone else. There is this mindset sometimes that because industry costs work in a certain way, something can't be done. But I think everyone around this room would recognise that certainly the best way environmentally and for everyone's health and for road safety is to get this stuff off the roads as quickly as possible. And if that can be via a far more environmentally friendly means of transport, such as rail, then I think we should be pushing some of the buttons and making representations to the County Council. I'd like to see this committee doing that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We've covered quite a lot of ground on this, haven't we? For two, minor recommendations, really. But at the end of the day, I think personally that the important thing that we have got to do as Derbyshire Dales District Council is to make sure we have primacy in relation to this air quality issue. I take Councillor Bates's point about maybe not muddling it up with the Luff, but I do feel that personally 20 miles an hour, I went to North Norfolk and every similar tourist area and all small villages, and everyone had a 20 mile an hour going through them. And it isn't about, it's more road safety, as Councillor G mentioned, but we shouldn't be allowing ourselves to be dictated to, because I don't know whether it was just one person's behest about this 20 mile an hour, or whether, and not turning it down, or whether it was a consensus of opinion. But I do feel we need to be pushing forward and challenging in relation to the 20 mile an hour on road safety issues. And Councillor Chapman, I take your point about Cromford, but there are some very, very awful bends a little bit further up that road, and you get two heavy goods vehicles meeting on there, and it is problematic. But I do take your point. Thank you.
ask the County Council to provide a height barrier on Twittington Bridge then. But it doesn't work with the travellers in Matlob. It might.
Once the bridge was had a temporary fix and whatever, the traffic increased past the Bentley Brook there and whatever, and because all the locals were very keen for the bridge to be brought back to how it was, because obviously they thought, well, it's so I spoke to Highways about that, and they said they couldn't return it to the original height because there was the risk of that same accident happening again. Therefore, they had to sort of minimise that. You know, I didn't understand it either at the time, but that's the reason they've done it.
Any further contributions? Can we move to a vote then, please? It's been proposed and seconded, so all in favour of the two recommendations? Thank you. I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, we're going to the next item, which is the agenda item 7, Biodiversity Action Plan specification. Are you taking this again then, Tim?
Yeah, changing hats rapidly, Chair. Thank you. Yeah. This report is effectively a referral from the Biodiversity Subcommittee and is really intended to seek approval of the money needed to progress with the Biodiversity Action Plan, with commissioning a Biodiversity Action Plan. To explain the quite complicated funding mechanism, what we're actually proposing setting up there is a revenue budget to support not only the commissioning of that action plan, but also to deal with the consultancy fees that we pay in relation to our service level agreement with Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, which has been enhanced in order to enable them to deal with biodiversity net gain issues through the planning system. I'll happily take any questions, but I should say the specification has been through the Biodiversity Subcommittee, and really the purpose, from my point of view here, is to approve the revenue budget, which will then be referred to the next meeting of Council for final approval.
Have any questions to Councillor Butler?
No, it's not a question. At the Biodiversity Subcommittee meeting, I declared an interest in this because of my role with the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, and so I won't be voting on it. But I'm quite happy to be. But I don't feel the need to leave the meeting.
Any questions, Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, it's actually I'm doing exactly what you've asked us not to do here. But it's a comment on the resolutions passed at the Biodiversity Subcommittee meeting, and it's item 7, which says work in partnership with other organisations, local community groups, schools, associations, Derbyshire Beekeepers Association. There is a glaring, massive omission from that partnership, and that's probably the industry that has the biggest effect countrywide and maybe worldwide on biodiversity, and that's the agricultural industry. I gave a presentation last week to the Cumbria Farmers Association on regenerative farming, and there were thousands there, well not thousands, probably a couple of dozen, but the enthusiasm from the farming fraternity to be involved in biodiversity is huge, and it looks like we're not excluding them, but we aren't encouraging them, should I say.
Councillor Butler.
Feeding into that point is that was discussed at the role of farming in biodiversity was discussed at the biodiversity subcommittee, and the work that was done was felt to be the areas where there are lots of schemes around for the farming community to do work on their land. And it was felt that what we as an authority didn't want to do was to target work on areas where there are already initiatives which can be undertaken. So we're not talking. We weren't. The discussion was about ensuring that
we use the levers where we have the biggest, where we can have the biggest impact, whilst recognising the fact that there are other levers that other people can use. So the discussions that we had were definitely not disregarding the impact of the farmers and farming community and other landowners, but the focus that we should be looking at is the areas of land which are outside that, because they can have an impact. We can have an impact on those areas particularly.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Matt, and there are SFI and all those other kind of things that are going on at the moment, but they're keen to share, they're keen to tell their experiences and to show their enthusiasm for it. You know, and that information and that kind of thing that's going on is good for this council to acknowledge, so that we you know, there's a lot to be learned from the work that's from British farming, basically, because there is, and I work with them all the time, and there is a resentment amongst British farmers that they are being told to do what they've already been doing for thousands of years. You know, they're not all industrial farmers. They're not all drenching the fields with pesticides, and they do want to have their voice heard on this, and they've got the experience, and I think maybe I'm being a bit over dramatic, but I think if we acknowledge them within our remit.
Wayne.
Yeah, could I ask, Justin, because I'm with you on that. I mean, there's a big initiative, isn't there, with elms at the moment for land, the farmers to set aside land and make better purpose of it. It's really important. So if our committee members on that particular group, you know, if there's any way we can dovetail into the farming side of things, that would be really, really useful. I think it's really, really important that we do environmentally, we get everything in a catch-all first time if we can. And that's really, the other question was, one of the meetings a while ago was about swift boxes and things like that on houses and what have you. Is that something that we're going to be discussing in that particular group?
We debated that, was it last evening, 2 evenings ago?
Oh, did you?
2 evenings ago.
I wasn't there,
yes,
so
I
I just wanted to yeah, that's really good. Thank you very much. Cheers.
It's just going on from what Councillor Chapman and Councillor Wayne have said. I've had a meeting this afternoon to do with the flooding, and Andrew Critchlow from the NFU was invited along, and he's got such wealth of knowledge, and just to, you know, get people's ideas on board. You know, these are the stewards of our countryside. They've got lots of expertise, and you know, let's listen to their views. Thank you.
Any further contributions? I'm not sure if has it been proposed and seconded. Well, right. Thank you, Councillor Wayne. Seconder, Councillor Chapman. Right. Can we have a vote then, please? All in favour? Just one abstention, as far as I can see. Right. Thank you.
I'll do my best, Chair. Thank you. So this report, I would have brought it before the new council formed back in May. So given the time delay, that's why it's coming now that the new council's formed. But essentially, the LGA provide a grant for councils to develop proposals to solve housing issues in their area. This is the second time we've been successful with that grant funding. We used this grant initially to 5 years ago to help fund the council housing programme idea. So we've got some success with the LGA, which is good. And we've, in working with partnership with Amber Valley Borough Council, we undertook to go through committee and get approval to take this forward before when we commission the research. The report undertaken by Altair, a respected company often employed by the LGA, does provide quite a picture of the private rented sector in the district, talking to both landlords and tenants through a variety of face-to-face or meetings over Zoom and also a questionnaire. And you can see from the report, and if you've read the full report, there are three key issues that affect the private rented sector. The age of the properties, and that combined with the condition, the issues affecting security of tenure that many people are concerned about, and the cost of the properties as well. So those three things combined, you can see from the report that the tenants typically have quite a negative view, and the landlords typically have a fairly positive view on how the market's going. So there are some large issues at work here around local housing allowance, which restricts what people can afford to pay from their own benefits, and then topping up to pay for rents. There are, for a lot of people, I think the report shows that 63% of the tenants have a household income of less than £25,000 a year. So it's often where the poorest in our society live, probably the most vulnerable in many cases. So there's a real issue there in terms of the condition of the property, the security of tenure that tenants feel that they have or don't have, and the cost that it takes to live there. A lot of people want to leave the sector and become social tenants because they see that as a more affordable and better place to be than in the private sector. So not many people are aspiring to live in the private rented sector for the longer term. The difficulty for the council is, and for your housing team, it's the same size as the social rented sector. So there's about 4,500 houses in each sector, and whilst we make good use of the social housing sector, we're making not such good use of the private rented sector. For us, it's the biggest cause of homelessness in the district. Typically, that's where most of our homelessness clients come from when the landlords end a tenancy. But it's where we're trying to place a lot of people because of the shortage of affordable housing that we have through social housing. So it's a real headache for us in the housing team because it's where a lot of customers come from, and when we're trying to place people. The costs are an issue, as I mentioned, and we want people to stay there for a long time. We don't want them to come back in this sort of revolving door of homelessness to become a client again down the line. And we do lots of things around the edges of this, trying to, we pay rent in advance to give tenants, the opportunity to not have to go and find a month's rent, for example, or we help with the bonds and the rent deposits to help that as well. And we help with other things around furniture and storage and all the other things that you would expect your housing team to do to help tenants be successful. But the overriding issues are around the cost of the security and the repair. So this has been something that me and my team have been grappling with for a number of years because it's not really changed since we started here in 2002 after stock transfer. And this study is giving us, really for the first time, a reasonable overview of what's happening in the sector. And we've come up with a few recommendations that we'd like to put to members. The first is to put more officer resource into trying to improve the sector day by day. So within section 3, you can see how we've set out in more detail the recommendations. So really, we want to do more work with landlords, more work with tenants, provide the information we provide, work with schemes like Decent and Safe Homes and with Derbyshire Law Centre to give and provide more information. We want to look at how we can develop accreditation schemes potentially so we can get a way of trying to improve through an educational approach, perhaps the conditions that, in the private rented sector. And we can do that through funding a temporary post using homelessness grant funding we get from the government to expand the role within the team. The second option is something that Tim's already actually leading on, so it's a kind of a given really, in that we've had grant funding from DLUC to look at a mass inspection regime of rented properties across Derbyshire Dales, Amber Valley and Erewash. So that's a game changer in terms of giving Tim's team more resources to consider the conditions in the sector and come back to government with hopefully maybe some proposals around how we can look at improving things. And the third option is to do something which I kind of described the initial report as putting our toe in the water. I'm kind of looking at putting a foot in the water now in terms of taking two opportunities further by exploring whether they're feasible or not. One is to look at an ethical lettings agency, so very different to a private lettings agency. It'd be an ethical lettings agency that we would consider, and also whether the council itself could provide private rented accommodation. So we've got a model that provides social housing. Could we have a model that provides private rented accommodation? That happens elsewhere in the country. Both those models do elsewhere. And it's kind of looking at whether that would be feasible using the balance of the grant that's remaining. Don't particularly want to give it back to the LGA. I hope they're not watching this evening. But you know, to give that a bit of a working over and then come back to council with some more detailed information on whether those two options are feasible or not. So.
Thank you, Rob, for your excellent analysis, as ever, on this serious problem. Do you have any questions from members? Councillor Boothroyd.
Just a question on option B. So we're saying that these inspections are already happening. Is that that's my understanding of it?
Not quite. Maybe Tim would want to give a bit more detail.
We were approached by DLUC to take part in something called the PRS Pathfinder study. There's 16 authorities across the country involved in this. It's quite rare that we as a rural authority get approached and offered money to do things like this. However, we were, and I put a message out to colleagues around the county, and 2 other districts came on board to be part of that study. Effectively, what we're doing, we're commissioning consultants to carry out a mass inspection exercise across the 3 council areas. We're currently in the process of procuring that. So the inspections aren't happening yet. And I won't speak further about the procurement process because we're in the middle of it.
And just to check, so the idea is that we take those inspection reports and further options would come to the table potentially, depending on the findings.
Perhaps should elaborate the DLUC's idea. One of DLUC's ideas is to test the feasibility of using civil penalties, so like a posh kind of fixed penalty, to fund housing inspection services. So part of what we'll be looking at is whether that's an option for enforcement work, which is what my team do in the private rented sector. More frequently, we expect to be referring people to advice services and helping them with retrofit and things like that to try and improve properties rather than taking enforcement action. However, it is something we are required to do. As part of the study, we're also required to think about legacy. What happens once the money runs out? How are we going to carry on doing that work?
Shelley.
Yes, my attention is inevitably drawn to option C, which is the most intriguing one. I just wonder if I understand at the moment, obviously this is a small-scale intervention and it's exploratory work. We're just trying to find out a bit more about how this would work, and that's what I'm interested in knowing. Has this worked in other parts of the country, and can you give us any examples that might be relatively local to here?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so across the country, different councils, particularly larger councils, have got more resources and spend more time working with the private rented sector. So I haven't got any in my head right now, but I know, for example, in the past, Amber Valley and their stock transfer company, Futures Housing, did quite a lot of work with private landlords through a leasing scheme, which is a kind of ethical lettings approach. Birmingham City Council, obviously one of the largest authorities, do quite a bit of interaction with their private renter sector. So if you relate it to here, we kind of tiptoe around the edge sometimes. So if you're trying to place a tenant in a property and get a landlord to take them on, because as you can see from the report, some aren't keen on our clients, you're trying to incentivize that. So you might do that through various mechanisms which come through the ethical lettings agency. So you might do the sort of background checks on a client to make sure that they are who they say they are. You might help with the rent deposit. You might help with insurance or other things. So the idea of the report is to develop that suite of interventions that we might be able to look at in the future and see whether that would make a difference in our particular market. In terms of the becoming a private landlord ourselves, I mean, that is quite a step as an intervention. In the past, Homes England have funded grant schemes for for-profit and not-for-profit providers to provide private rented accommodation. So the dynamics of that, the economics of that are very different to social housing, because you're not providing social housing, you're providing something more, something different. So it might be to a slightly higher standard, or it might include white goods, whereas sometimes social housing doesn't. So, and you might charge a different rent, obviously, because how it's financed and how it would be operated would be different. So in some ways it would be similar to the council housing programme, but in other ways it could be different. So that's the idea of the further work, really. So we think it's an opportunity to look at something, and it's just having a bit more of a detailed review of that, and bringing in those other options, or other examples rather, from other areas to give us, could it work here? Because it might not, I have to be honest. These aren't everyday things I'd like to pitch up and have a go at, but the model's broken locally. We've got to come up with something different, because this is where most of our clients live, that are vulnerable, low income, and they're going to become our customer one day as they try and exit the sector. So we've got to do something different to try and improve the model locally.
Thank you. That's been very helpful. Just to come back very, very quickly, and can you assure us that this work won't have any detrimental impact on the existing work that the council does in terms of placing people through social housing and with registered social landlords?
Absolutely. What we're trying to do is increase the options available, not diminish one or the other.
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick question about the actual recommendations, because there are only two and they're quite explicit. And when I go to the financial and resource implications, I think it details item 1, which is the Home Options Officer. It gives an amount of, is it £70,000? But then I look at recommendation 2, and I've just put a little health warning on this. It says, Director of Housing engage suitable consultants, which is always a worry to me, to develop an initial business plan for ethical lettings agency. Have we got any financial and resource implications concerning recommendation 2?
Yes, Chair, through you. So there's a balance remaining of the initial grant we received. That was £25,000. We've got £8,361 left, I think the exact figure is. So it's that money that I'm proposing to use, not any taxpayers' money or any other budget we haven't got. So it's just a balance left on the original grant.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Living in Matlock and having daughters and friends, they've got friends, and it's very, very difficult for them to get into their own homes. And whilst I support, the ethical side of things all the time and looking for the best options, I mean, can we guarantee that it will always be less than... The problem is with young people is that they struggle with basically a deposit. That's it. And I've had this conversation with you before about this, and the potential of us having some sort of business sort of side of things to help provide deposits that will be paid back, obviously. That will then hopefully keep people out of social housing and what have you. And I'm just wondering whether or not that's something that you're going to be continuing to look at, because we've had discussions about shared housing previously, and I had to point out that 25% that you've got to mortgage and then you pay rent on the remaining 75%, that's more than people paying a mortgage. And what's preventing those people from doing that is the actual deposit. So I would like us as an organisation to be more supportive, and then we are being a little bit ethical as well. But thanks very much.
Yes, I mean, there are models that exist called things like do-it-yourself shared ownership, DISO, is a thing from the past. I know Amber Valley Council looked and have delivered that previously, or a version of that previously. There are ways of, I mean, if that's what members are saying, they'd like, you know, you could pick that up through the Alliance Housing Group. You know, that's looking to develop options and help people across different tenures. That would be, that kind of model could work, and you could use the schemes that we've got available to kind of finance that sort of thing. But deposits are an issue. And I think you're right, again, with shared ownership, it's not a market that everybody can afford that's in housing need. We've developed, as a council, we've developed now 2 units, both of which are sold, and that income comes back into us to help fund a future scheme. So they are a worthwhile model, but they don't fit everybody. So part of the strategy of the council going forward, I would suggest, is multi-tenure. You're looking at social rent, private rent, sub-market ownership models, and hopefully the local plan will pick up everything else. So, but it's giving people options and fitting them with the economic profile of the district, so people can make the right choice for them going forward.
Yeah. For me, what it is, it's about community cohesion. It's about retaining communities and not fragmenting communities by our young people having to leave this community to go and move into houses in other towns where it's cheaper. But thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Rob. Just to add to that, as you know from your conversation with my wife this morning, if you have a shared ownership property and you have problem neighbours, you have great difficulty selling to move somewhere else. So that's another dilemma with that sort of tenure. Before we move to debate, no, right. Can I have a proposal and a seconder for the recommendations, please? Oh, you were asking a question, or?
No,
All right, yeah, right, fine.
I'd like to move the recommendations, Chair. In doing so, I had some initial reservations about some aspects of this report, and not about the principle, but about the timing, because as I think many members of this committee will know, that the new administration is in the process of putting together a very ambitious housing strategy, and the private sector is going to form an integral part of that strategy. So I was a little bit nervous about preempting a discussion of that strategy at this committee by pressing ahead with this particular piece of work. But I think there's an opportunity here which we need to seize with both hands. But I would say this, as I said, this is the issues affecting the private rented sector in the housing market is one part, as I said, of a very ambitious housing strategy which we are developing. And I think that shows the ambition of our housing team and of the new administration. So I think it's a really important initiative we're taking. I think it gives you a flavour of the sort of initiatives you're going to see coming forward from the new administration over the next couple of months. One thing I would add, and it's a point I've made to Rob Coggins and his colleagues, that certainly in our part of the world, the local housing market and the private sector housing market in particular doesn't recognise local authority boundaries. So I would urge that we do talk to our neighbouring authorities, particularly those in the High Peak, because it may well be that an initiative of this kind, which is looking at setting up innovative new organisations and companies, may be better developed and delivered on a collaborative basis with other local authorities. Now, it's great that Derbyshire Dales is taking initiative itself, but I think we need to be open to the view that on some occasions, if we work collaboratively, those people who we set out to benefit can benefit more widely by councils working together. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments, Chair. I think we do need to acknowledge the role of the private sector landlord. You've said how many properties there are, and you know they're not all bogeymen or property magnates. Sometimes people have just, I haven't got any extra properties, but you know, for some people it is their pension, and they are responsible landlords. And as Rob's alluded to, there are sometimes difficult and challenging tenancy situations for those landlords. So we need to remember that. Also, in the report, it says there were a wide range of issues with the private sector properties, with many being unsatisfied with the service or resolution they received from their landlord. Well, I think at the last full council meeting, Councillor Stuart Lee's brought in a question about platform housing and the issues we've had with them. So it's not always perfect in the social housing sector. Thank you.
Right, we move to a vote in that case. It's been proposed and seconded, so all in favour? Thank you very much. Unanimous? Oh, I think we got away with lightly on that one, didn't we, Rob? or you did, Rob?
I was ready to keep going.
Thanks, members, for your contributions, and have a safe journey home. At least you haven't got flooding, I don't think, now, have you? So I think you should be okay.